It was a night like no other, drenched in the relentless downpour that lashed against the windows with a ferocity that echoed through the empty house. The wind howled, and every so often, a clap of thunder would roar, shaking the very foundation of the home. Inside, the dim light of the television flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Our protagonist, Emily, a college student home for the holidays, found herself alone. Her parents were out of town, and her younger brother was at a sleepover. Emily had always loved horror movies, and a stormy night seemed like the perfect backdrop for a scare. She curled up on the sofa, a bowl of popcorn in her lap, eyes glued to the screen as the movie played out its terrifying scenes. The rain seemed to fall harder, drumming against the roof in a relentless rhythm. The movie, a classic tale of supernatural horror, drew Emily in, making her forget the world outside. She was on edge, every jump scare eliciting a gasp or a nervous giggle. It was during one of these moments, as the protagonist on screen faced their own terror, that Emily noticed something from the corner of her eye. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, perhaps a shadow cast by the swaying trees outside. But when she glanced directly at the window, her heart skipped a beat. There, standing just beyond the glass, was a dark figure, silhouetted by the dim light filtering through the rain. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, hoping it was just her imagination, but the figure remained, unmoving and ominous. Her pulse quickened. She tried to dismiss it as a figment of her imagination, a byproduct of the scary movie and the storm outside. But the figure did not waver. It stood there, a silent sentinel in the darkness. Emily's mind raced, debating whether to approach the window or stay put. She chose caution, slowly reaching for the remote to pause the movie. With the movie paused, the room fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the pounding rain and occasional rumble of thunder. Emily's eyes were fixed on the window, where the figure remained. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for the lamp on the side table, flicking it on to banish the shadows. But as the light filled the room, the figure outside became clearer, its dark form stark against the illuminated background. It was tall and cloaked in darkness, features obscured by the rain and the night. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. Her rational mind grappled with the impossibility of it. A stranger standing in the storm, staring into her home. She rose slowly from the sofa, never taking her eyes off the window, and edged toward the hallway. As she moved, the figure shifted slightly, its head tilting as if following her movements. Panic surged within her. She reached for the light switch to illuminate the porch to get a better look at this intruder. But as her fingers touched the switch, the bulb exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging the porch back into darkness. Emily let out a yelp, her heart pounding in her chest. The failure of the light seemed to embolden the figure. It moved closer to the window, its outline growing more distinct. Emily's fear turned to terror as she realized this was no figment of her imagination. The figure was real, and it was right outside her home. She backed away, her mind racing with possibilities. Who could it be? What did they want? The soft tapping on the window broke her thoughts. At first, it was gentle, almost tentative. But with each passing second, it grew more insistent, more demanding. Emily turned and ran, her bare feet slapping against the wooden floor as she fled to her bedroom. She slammed the door shut, locking it with shaking hands. In the safety of her room, she grabbed her cell phone from the nightstand, dialing 911 with frantic speed. Her voice trembled as she spoke to the dispatcher, trying to convey the urgency of her situation. "There's someone outside my house," she whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "They're trying to get in." As she waited for the police to arrive, Emily could hear the footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and deliberate, each step echoing ominously. She pressed herself against the door, listening intently. The minutes felt like hours, her fear mounting with every passing second. Calling for help, the operator's voice was calm, a stark contrast to Emily's mounting hysteria. "Stay on the line with me, ma'am. Officers are on their way. Can you describe the person you saw?" Emily struggled to find the words. "It's dark. I couldn't see their face. They were just standing there watching me." "Okay, stay calm. Help is coming. Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm in my bedroom. I locked the door." "Good. Stay there. Can you still hear them?" Emily held her breath, straining to catch any sound from outside her room. The house was eerily silent, save for the muffled roar of the storm. "I heard footsteps earlier, but now, nothing." "All right, the officers should be there any moment." "You're doing great. Just stay on the line." Emily nodded to herself, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Each second felt like an eternity, but finally, she heard the distant wail of sirens. Relief washed over her, though it did little to quell the anxiety gnawing at her insides. The red and blue lights flashing outside were a welcome sight. Emily listened as the officers announced their arrival. The heavy thud of their footsteps on the porch and the murmur of their voices through the front door. She unlocked her bedroom door and hesitantly stepped into the hallway, her heart still pounding. "Miss? Police. You can come out now." Emily moved towards the front door, relief mixing with lingering fear. Two officers stood in the entryway, their expressions serious. "Are you all right?" one of them asked. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw someone outside the window. They were watching me." The officers exchanged glances. "We'll take a look around," one of them said. "Stay inside and keep the doors locked." Emily watched as they moved through the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They inspected the windows, the porch, the perimeter of the house. Every shadow was scrutinized, every corner checked. After what felt like an eternity, they returned. "We didn't find anyone," the officer said, his tone careful. "But there are footprints in the mud outside the window. Looks like someone was definitely here." Emily's blood ran cold. "But who? Why?" "We're not sure," the officer admitted. "Could be a prank, or someone looking to scare you. We'll patrol the area tonight, but if you see anything else, call us immediately." Emily thanked them, though the reassurance felt hollow. As the officers left, she locked the door behind them, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. The muddy footprints were a chilling reminder that the night's events were all too real. The days following the incident were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Emily found herself jumping at every noise, every unexpected shadow. The comfort of her home had been shattered, replaced by a pervasive sense of vulnerability. She went through the motions of daily life, but her mind was always on high alert, scanning for any sign of the mysterious intruder. Her parents returned a few days later, their concern palpable when Emily recounted the night's events. They installed additional locks, security cameras, and motion sensor lights, but no measure seemed enough to restore her peace of mind. Emily's friends and neighbors offered their support, though many were skeptical of her story. The lack of tangible evidence beyond the footprints led some to believe it was a figment of her imagination, a byproduct of a stormy night and a horror movie. Despite the skepticism, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She replayed the night over and over in her mind, scrutinizing every detail, every moment. Who was the figure? What did they want? Why had they chosen her home? Nightmares plagued her sleep, vivid reenactments of the figure at the window. Only this time it broke through, reaching for her with shadowy hands. She would wake in a cold sweat, heart racing, and find it impossible to fall back asleep. During the day, she dove into research, trying to find any clue or similar occurrence. She scoured local news, forums, and urban legends, looking for a pattern, a hint of explanation. The more she searched, the more questions she found. The figure remained an enigma, a dark stain on her memories that refused to fade. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's obsession with that night grew. She found herself lost in thought, replaying the events with a meticulous eye for detail. She remembered the exact moment she first saw the figure, the way it moved, the sound of the rain against the windows. She could recall the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of her stomach, the helplessness as she waited for the police to arrive. It was during one of these moments of reflection that she noticed something she had previously overlooked. In her memory, the figure's silhouette seemed to have a peculiar shape, something that hadn't stood out to her in the panic of the moment. It was almost as if it had been holding something, a detail obscured by the darkness and rain. With this new piece of the puzzle, Emily's investigation took a more focused turn. She began interviewing her neighbors, hoping someone might have seen or heard something that night. Most had been oblivious, wrapped in their own lives and sheltered from the storm. However, one elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, mentioned seeing a strange car parked down the street earlier that evening, something she found odd given the weather. Emily also reached out to local experts on folklore and urban legends. She learned of old stories about shadowy figures that would appear during storms, tales meant to scare children into staying indoors. But these were just stories, right? Determined to find answers, Emily enlisted the help of a friend studying criminology. Together, they analyzed the footprints and the limited physical evidence. While they didn't uncover anything definitive, the process provided a semblance of control, a way for Emily to confront her fears head-on. Confrontation with the truth. Emily's obsession eventually led her to the local library, where she combed through old newspapers and records. One article caught her eye, a report from decades ago about a series of break-ins during severe storms. The intruder had never been caught, and the description matched the vague outline of the figure she had seen. This revelation sent chills down her spine. Could it be the same person, or was it a copycat? Driven by this discovery, Emily began to piece together the history of these incidents. The break-ins always occurred in the same pattern, during heavy storms, targeting homes with young women alone. The thought that she had become part of this sinister pattern was terrifying. Her research culminated in a chilling realization. The figure was not a ghost or a legend, but a very real, very dangerous individual. With this newfound understanding, Emily knew she had to act. She couldn't just wait for another storm to bring the intruder back. Emily's preparations were meticulous. She enlisted the help of her friend in criminology, and together, they devised a plan to catch the intruder. They set up additional cameras, both visible and hidden, and created a system to alert the police immediately. The next storm came quicker than expected. As the rain began to pour and thunder rumbled in the distance, Emily felt a familiar knot of fear in her stomach. But this time, she was ready. The figure appeared again, just as before, standing in the rain, staring through the window. But Emily didn't run. She stood her ground, camera in hand, recording the figure's every move. When it started knocking, she didn't flinch. She had already sent the alert to the police. The figure, sensing something was different, began to retreat, but it was too late. The police arrived swiftly, catching the intruder just as he tried to flee. The figure was unmasked, revealing a gaunt, haggard man with a history of similar crimes. His capture brought a sense of closure to the community and to Emily. In the aftermath, Emily found herself grappling with a mix of relief and lingering fear. The man who had terrorized her and others was behind bars, but the psychological scars remained. She sought therapy to help process the trauma, finding solace in understanding her own reactions and fears. Her story became a cautionary tale in the community, a reminder of the importance of vigilance and the reality of dangers lurking in the shadows. Emily's determination and bravery were lauded, but she remained humble, knowing that fear had driven her as much as courage. Months later, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. Emily returned to college, her experience having changed her perspective on many things. She was more cautious, more aware of her surroundings, but also more appreciative of the safety she had once taken for granted. The community installed better lighting and security measures, spurred by Emily's ordeal. The legend of the stormy night became a part of local lore, a story told with a shiver and a sense of relief that the terror had ended. As for Emily, she continued her studies, determined to use her experience to help others. She volunteered with victim support groups, sharing her story and offering a beacon of hope and resilience. And every time a storm rolled in, she would take a deep breath, reminding herself of the strength she had found within. I have always adored rainy days. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window, the way the world outside seems to blur into a watercolor painting, and the comforting feeling of being cocooned inside while the storm rages on, it all felt like magic to me. So, when I saw the forecast predicting heavy rain for the night, I was thrilled. It was the perfect opportunity to spend a cozy evening alone at home. I prepared a bowl of popcorn, lit a few scented candles, and settled down with a book I'd been eager to start. The rain began to fall, at first a gentle patter, then gradually growing into a heavy downpour. The sound was soothing, creating an atmosphere that was both cozy and a little bit eerie. I curled up on the sofa, letting myself get lost in the pages of my book. The storm outside intensified, the rain battering the windows and the occasional rumble of thunder adding to the ambience. I was completely immersed in my book when I heard a sudden noise from the kitchen. It sounded like something had fallen. I frowned, setting my book aside and getting up to investigate. In the kitchen, I found a knife lying on the floor. It had clearly been taken from the knife block, but I had no memory of using it or leaving it out. My heart began to race as I picked it up. I tried to convince myself that I must have left it precariously balanced and it had simply fallen. But deep down, I knew something was off. As I returned to the living room, I tried to shake off the unease that had settled over me. I sat back down, pulling the blanket tighter around me, but I couldn't concentrate on my book. The cozy atmosphere now felt oppressive. The shadows cast by the candlelight seemed to dance menacingly. The sound of the rain grew louder, almost deafening, as if trying to drown out any other noise. I tried to focus on my book again, but the sense of unease only grew. Then, I heard a distinct sound of footsteps. They were soft at first, almost imperceptible, but they grew louder, moving through the house. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen. It sounded like someone was walking around, but I couldn't see anyone. I got up and moved cautiously through the house, checking each room, but found nothing. The footsteps continued, seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Desperate for some explanation, I decided to call my friend Sarah, who lived just down the street. My hands shook as I dialed her number. "Sarah, can you come over? I think there's someone in my house," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah agreed to come over immediately. As I waited for her, I huddled on the sofa, every nerve on edge. The footsteps continued, a constant reminder that I was not alone. Finally, I heard the sound of Sarah's car pulling up, and the footsteps stopped. Friend's arrival and temporary calm. When Sarah arrived, the relief was palpable. The house fell into an eerie silence as soon as she walked in. I quickly explained what had happened, showing her the knife and describing the footsteps. Sarah was skeptical but supportive. "Maybe it's just your imagination," she suggested gently. "The storm can play tricks on your mind." Her presence made me feel safer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. We decided to stay up together, talking and trying to distract ourselves. The hours passed, and nothing unusual happened. The rain continued to pour, but the footsteps did not return. A few days later, still haunted by the events of that night, I decided to check the footage from the security cameras I had installed around the house. I wasn't expecting to find anything, but I needed to be sure. As I reviewed the recordings, my heart sank. There, in the grainy footage, was the figure of a man, drenched from head to toe, walking through my house. He moved with a deliberate slowness, as if he had all the time in the world. The sight of him sent chills down my spine. He was there in my home while I had been just a few rooms away. The footage showed him disappearing moments before Sarah arrived, vanishing without a trace. I couldn't understand how he had gotten in or out without being seen. I showed the footage to Sarah, and her skepticism turned to concern. We watched it over and over, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The man seemed to materialize out of nowhere and disappear just as mysteriously. There were no signs of forced entry, and the doors and windows had all been locked. We debated the possibilities. Could it have been a neighbor playing a prank? But why and how would they get in and out undetected? The more we discussed it, the more questions we had. The mystery consumed me, and I found myself replaying the events of that night in my mind, searching for any clue I might have missed. Determined to find answers, I began to research similar incidents and local history. I combed through old newspapers, looking for reports of break-ins or strange occurrences during storms. I found a few cases that seemed eerily similar: homes entered without any signs of forced entry, mysterious figures seen during heavy rain. I also spoke with my neighbors, asking if they had seen or heard anything unusual that night. Most had been oblivious, sheltered from the storm and unaware of the strange events unfolding just down the street. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, mentioned seeing a man standing in the rain near my house earlier that evening, but she thought nothing of it at the time. My research led me to a local historian who specialized in urban legends and folklore. He told me about old stories of spirits and entities that appeared during storms, tales meant to explain the inexplicable. While intriguing, these stories offered no concrete answers. With the help of Sarah and the historian, I began to piece together the clues. The man in the footage seemed to be connected to the storm, appearing only during heavy rain. His presence was unsettling, but his actions were deliberate, almost ritualistic. We developed a theory that perhaps he was a homeless man seeking shelter or someone with a deeper, more sinister motive. We couldn't rule out the possibility that he was somehow linked to the folklore we had uncovered. Whatever the case, I knew I needed to be prepared for his return. Determined to catch the intruder if he returned, Sarah and I set up a plan. We installed more cameras, both visible and hidden, and set up motion sensors around the house. We also devised a system to alert the police immediately if he was detected. We didn't have to wait long. Another storm rolled in a few weeks later, bringing with it the same sense of foreboding. Sarah stayed with me that night, and we waited in tense anticipation. The rain began to fall heavily, and we kept a close eye on the camera feeds. Sure enough, just after midnight, the man appeared again. He was soaked, his clothes clinging to his body, and he moved with the same deliberate slowness as before. We watched as he made his way through the house, seemingly unaware of the cameras. This time we were ready. As soon as he entered, we triggered the alert to the police and moved to confront him. My heart raced as we approached him, armed with nothing but our determination and a sense of justice. "Who are you? What do you want?" I demanded, my voice shaking but firm. The man turned slowly, his eyes blank and expressionless. He didn't speak, just stared at us with an unsettling intensity. It was as if he was not fully there, a phantom caught between worlds. Before we could react further, the police arrived, their presence breaking the tense standoff. The man made no attempt to flee or resist as they took him into custody. He was drenched and silent, offering no explanation for his actions. In the days that followed, the police investigated the man thoroughly. He was identified as a transient with a history of mental illness, but his connection to the folklore and his eerie behavior remained unexplained. He had no memory of his actions or how he had entered and exited the house. The mystery was partially solved, but many questions remained. The police assured us that he would receive the help he needed and that he posed no further threat. While this brought some comfort, the events of that night left a lasting impact on me. The experience changed me. I became more cautious, more aware of my surroundings. The sense of safety and comfort I once felt in my home was forever altered. But I also felt a newfound strength and resilience. I had faced my fears head-on and come out stronger for it. I continued my studies, determined to use my experience to help others. I volunteered with local organizations that supported mental health and homelessness, hoping to make a difference in the lives of those who, like the man who had entered my home, were lost and in need of help. The rainy nights that I once loved now held a different meaning for me. They were a reminder of the strange and unsettling events that had unfolded, but also of the strength I had found within myself. And as the rain fell outside my window, I knew that I was prepared for whatever came my way. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that seemed to wrap the world in a cocoon of shadow and sound. The rain lashed against the windows with a relentless fury, and the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits. Inside, I was alone, trying to focus on my college project. My name is Emily, and I was a second-year student majoring in history, currently deep in research for a paper that was due in a few days. Despite the tumultuous weather outside, I tried to maintain my concentration, but the storm made it difficult. I sat at my desk, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm circle of light over my books and notes. The rest of the room was swallowed by darkness, only occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning. The sound of the rain was almost hypnotic, a steady drumming that matched the rhythm of my thoughts. But tonight, it was more than just a background noise. It felt oppressive, as if the storm was trying to seep into the house and disrupt my work. After a few hours of struggling to focus, I decided to take a break. I made my way to the kitchen to fix myself a cup of tea, hoping the warmth would help me relax. As I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, I felt a chill run down my spine, an inexplicable sensation of being watched. I shook it off, attributing it to the eerie ambience of the storm. As I walked back towards my room with the steaming cup of tea, I heard it for the first time. A soft, almost whispering voice calling my name. "Sarah." I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was faint but unmistakable, and it seemed to come from within the house. I was certain I was alone. The logical part of my mind insisted it must have been the wind or my imagination, but the fear was real. I stood there for a moment, straining to hear anything else. The house was silent except for the relentless rain. Gathering my courage, I decided to check each room, just to be sure. I moved through the house methodically, starting with the living room, then the dining room, and finally the kitchen. Each room was empty, just as I had left it. Feeling a bit foolish but still unnerved, I returned to my room and tried to shake off the unsettling experience. I settled back at my desk, determined to finish my project. But as I began to read through my notes, the voice called again, louder this time. "Sarah." It was closer, more insistent. Panic surged through me, and I locked my door, diving under the covers of my bed. I lay there, trembling, unable to comprehend what was happening. The rest of the night passed in a tense, sleepless haze. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind set my nerves on edge. When the first light of dawn finally broke through the storm clouds, I emerged from my hiding place, exhausted but resolute. I had to find out what was going on. Over breakfast, I recounted the events of the night to my mother. She listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, she hesitated before speaking. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you about this house." Her tone sent a shiver down my spine. She went on to reveal a dark chapter of the house's history. Decades ago, a young girl named Sarah had been murdered here on a stormy night much like the one I had just experienced. Since then, there had been reports from various families who lived here of hearing her voice calling out during storms, as if she were still seeking help. The revelation left me stunned. I had always known our house was old, but I had no idea it harbored such a tragic past. My mother explained that she hadn't wanted to scare me, hoping that whatever lingered from that night had long since faded. But clearly that was not the case. Learning the house's history, armed with this new information, I decided to dig deeper into the history of the house and the story of Sarah. I spent the next few days at the local library, poring over old newspapers and records. I discovered that Sarah had been only 16 when she was murdered, her life cut short in a brutal and senseless act of violence. The case had never been solved, and over the years, it had faded into local legend. I also found accounts from previous residents who had experienced similar disturbances. They described hearing a girl's voice, seeing fleeting shadows, and feeling an inexplicable sense of dread during storms. Some had even moved away, unable to bear the constant fear. The more I learned, the more determined I became to understand what was happening. I reached out to a few of the previous residents, hoping they could provide more details. Most were reluctant to talk about their experiences, but a few shared their stories, each one echoing my own in eerie detail. As I delved deeper into the history of the house, I uncovered more about Sarah's life. She had been a bright, cheerful girl, well-liked by everyone who knew her. Her murder had shocked the community, and the lack of resolution had left a lingering wound. I also learned about the family who had lived in the house at the time. They had moved away shortly after the murder, unable to cope with the grief and the memories. The house had stood vacant for several years before being sold again, passing through several owners before finally coming to us. I spoke with a local historian who specialized in the area's history and folklore. He told me about the legends surrounding Sarah's death and the many stories of hauntings and supernatural occurrences in the region. He believed that Sarah's spirit was trapped, unable to move on because of the violent way she had died and the unresolved nature of her death. With each new piece of information, the picture became clearer. Sarah's spirit was reaching out, seeking help to resolve the circumstances of her death. But why had she called my name specifically? I had no connection to her that I knew of, and yet her voice had called out to me, drawing me into her story. I began to suspect that there was more to Sarah's death than just a random act of violence. There were hints in the old newspapers and police reports of secrets and scandals, things that had been hushed up or overlooked. It seemed that Sarah had known something or been involved in something that had led to her murder. Determined to uncover the truth, I continued my research, looking for any clue that might explain why Sarah's spirit was still here and what she wanted from me. I felt a growing connection to her, a sense of responsibility to help her find peace. As another storm approached, I knew I had to be ready for another encounter with Sarah's spirit. I set up recording equipment in my room and the hallway, hoping to capture any evidence of the haunting. I also gathered some items that I thought might help: an old photograph of Sarah I had found, a piece of jewelry that had belonged to her, and a journal where I could document my experiences. I spent hours preparing, making sure everything was in place. Sarah's story had consumed me, and I was determined to help her, no matter what it took. I felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation as the storm clouds gathered and the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm hit with full force, the wind howling and the rain battering the windows just as it had before. I sat in my room, the equipment set up and ready, waiting for the moment when Sarah's voice would call out again. It didn't take long. "Sarah." The voice was clearer this time, more insistent. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Sarah, I'm here," I said softly, hoping she could hear me. "I'm here to help you." The voice called again, closer now. I could feel her presence, a cold, tangible sensation that filled the room. "What do you need, Sarah? How can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The room grew colder, and I saw a faint, shimmering outline in the darkness. It was a figure, a girl, standing in the corner of the room. She was looking at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and hope. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Tell me what happened, Sarah," I urged, trying to reach out to her. "Tell me what you need." The figure moved closer, her outline becoming clearer. She was beautiful, with long hair and a delicate face, but there was a darkness around her, a shadow that spoke of pain and suffering. "I was betrayed," she said, her voice filled with sorrow. "I need justice. I need to be free." Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly to piece together the final details of Sarah's story. With the information she had given me, I revisited the old police reports and newspaper articles, looking for clues that might have been missed. I discovered that Sarah had been involved with a group of friends who had secrets of their own. There were rumors of jealousy, betrayal, and even blackmail. I uncovered letters and diary entries that painted a picture of a girl who had been caught up in something far beyond her control. She had known too much, and someone had decided to silence her. The more I learned, the more I understood the depth of her pain and her need for justice. Armed with this new understanding, I knew what I had to do. I reached out to the authorities with the evidence I had gathered, hoping to finally bring the truth to light. The case was reopened, and the investigation revealed the true circumstances of Sarah's death. Those responsible were finally held accountable, and the story that had been buried for so long was brought to light. That night, as another storm rolled in, I sat in my room, waiting for Sarah. The rain fell, the wind howled, but there was a different feeling in the air. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. "Sarah." The voice was softer this time, almost a sigh. The figure appeared again, but this time she looked different. There was a lightness to her, a sense of peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "I can rest now." As she faded away, I felt a warmth spread through the room, a sense of calm and closure. The storm continued, but the fear and tension were gone. Sarah had found her peace, and so had I, reflecting on the experience. The experience changed me in profound ways. I had always been a curious and driven person, but this journey had taught me the importance of empathy and understanding. I had connected with Sarah on a deep level, and her story had become a part of me. The house felt different now, lighter and more welcoming. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over it was gone, replaced by a sense of calm and tranquility. I knew that Sarah was at peace, and that brought me a sense of satisfaction and relief. I continued my studies, but my focus shifted. I became fascinated with the supernatural and the stories of those who had experienced similar encounters. I joined a group of like-minded individuals who sought to help spirits find peace and uncover the truth behind their stories. I also volunteered with organizations that supported victims of violence and their families, hoping to make a difference in the lives of those who had suffered like Sarah. Her story had inspired me to be more compassionate and proactive in helping others. As I sat by the window, watching the rain fall outside, I felt a sense of hope and purpose. The stormy nights that had once filled me with fear now brought a sense of peace and understanding. Sarah's story had changed my life, and I knew that I would carry her memory with me always. The house, once a place of darkness and fear, had become a sanctuary of peace and light. And as the rain continued to fall, I knew that I was ready to face whatever the future held, with the knowledge that I had helped a lost soul find her way home. Meet Sarah. Like many of us, she used to dread bedtime, hours spent tossing and turning, waking up groggy and irritable, and worst of all, her relentless snoring that not only disturbed her sleep, but her partner's as well. Desperate for a solution, Sarah tried everything. New mattresses, white noise machines, even sleeping pills. Nothing worked until she discovered our breathing for sleep routine. One particularly frustrating night, Sarah stumbled upon an article about the power of breathing to improve sleep. Skeptical but willing to try anything, she read about our breathing for sleep routine, a simple, scientifically backed method designed to clear sinuses, enhance breathing, and eliminate oxygen blockades. It promised to guide users through a simple breathing routine for the best sleep of their lives. Intrigued, she decided to give it a shot. As she began the routine, Sarah immediately felt her sinuses clear. She followed the step-by-step guide, learning how to breathe deeply and correctly. Within minutes, she noticed a significant difference. Her breathing was smoother, more relaxed. That night, she fell asleep faster than she had in years and, incredibly, stayed asleep all night. One of the most astonishing benefits was the end of her snoring. The routine included a simple breathing hack that stopped her snoring in minutes. Sarah learned that her habit of mouth breathing was activating her survival mode, preventing her from achieving truly restful sleep. By switching to nasal breathing, she deactivated this mode and allowed her body to fully relax. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. She couldn't remember the last time she felt so well rested. Her partner noticed the difference too. No more middle-of-the-night disruptions from her snoring. The transformation was remarkable, and Sarah knew she had found something special. Sarah's story is not unique. Many others have discovered the life-changing benefits of our breathing for sleep routine. Imagine falling asleep quickly, sleeping soundly through the night, and waking up feeling fully rested. No more snoring, no more grogginess, just deep, restorative sleep. Are you ready to transform your sleep like Sarah did? Our breathing for sleep routine is easy to follow and starts working immediately. Clear your sinuses, enhance your breathing, and remove oxygen blockades with our guided routine. Say goodbye to snoring and hello to the best sleep of your life. Don't spend another night tossing and turning. Experience the power of proper breathing and reclaim your nights. Try our breathing for sleep routine tonight and wake up to a new, refreshed you. Because everyone deserves the gift of deep, restful sleep. Check out the link for this wonder in the description and the comments. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of terror. Until next time, stay safe and beware the shadows.